Hello, fellow creative voyagers. This week's episode of the Indy Author Podcast is going to be a solo show. I'm going to talk about the recent launch of my fourth Ann Kinnear Suspense Novel, A Furnace for Your Foe. I'll talk about what I did and didn't do, and what I didn't do because I didn't think it would be useful versus what I didn't do because I didn't know how, what worked and didn't work, and what I do differently for future launches. I'm proud to join all the guests who have generously shared their knowledge with listeners of the podcast. Damon Courtney of BookFunnel, who in episode 76 shared information on how authors can use customized landing pages, opportunities offered by email integration, the power of giveaways to attract readers and strengthen ties to fans, the financial benefits of selling direct, and the rise of wide audio. Jane Friedman, who in episode 75, Key Book Publishing Paths, described considerations for fitting the path to your desired destination. We talked about how publishing isn't indie or traditional, it's a spectrum, and how hybrid authors aren't necessarily authors who are using hybrid publishers. We talked about lessons one model can learn from another and red flags to watch out for when assessing companies to do business with. A whole host of previous guests, Tiffany Yates Martin, Dale L. Roberts, Michael Laron, Joanna Penn, Robert Blake Whitehill, Lee Savino, Pauline Wiles, and Wade Walton, in episode 74 shared their perspectives on personal branding, and there have been many more. With an expanding set of resources available via the podcast and at theindyauthor.com, I've set up a Patreon account to solicit your support. Patreon enables you to support the creators who provide content you benefit from by pledging a regular financial contribution, in my case, $3 per month, which you can start and stop as you wish. Becoming a Patreon subscriber not only lets me know that you benefit from these resources, but also helps defray the costs of producing the podcast and of maintaining the website. To learn more about becoming a patron, please head over to patreon.com/theindyauthor, and that's Indy with a Y, or go to theindyauthor.com and click on the podcast tab. If you'd like to make an occasional contribution, perhaps to indicate the value that a specific episode or resource provided to you on your creative voyage, scroll to the bottom of any page at theindyauthor.com and click on the Buy Me a Coffee link to make a small contribution via PayPal or Stripe. Thank you for considering supporting my work at the Indy Author. Since this episode is basically one long personal update, I'm going to dispense with a separate personal update, except to say that I'm working on an Ann Kinnear Suspense short that's for an anthology. It's going to be the first short that I've written for a specific anthology and with a specific theme, and I'll let you know how that pans out in a future episode. We'll have a quick word from this episode's featured affiliate, and then we'll dive right into the conversation about book launches. Today's featured affiliate is the Alliance of Independent Authors, and it's very appropriate for the book launch themed episode because I just uploaded updated interior files for all my books that included the A Furnace for Your Foe in the Also by Matty Dalrymple section. Uploading revisions is free on all the platforms I use except for Ingram Spark, which charges $25 per book to upload an updated interior file, and more if you also want to update the cover. I think that charging for uploading updated material is short-sighted because it disincents people from uploading the most recent and best versions of their content. For example, I have 15 print books on Ingram Spark, regular and large print editions of my 4 Ann Kinnear Suspense novels and my 3 Lizzy Ballard Thrillers, and regular print of Taking the Short Tack, and it would have cost me $375 to make the update to the Also By section. I would never spend that much money for that update, which means that people buy my books on platforms that Ingram Spark services, which is pretty much every print book sales platform except Amazon, including bookstores and libraries, might never know that there was a 4th Ann Kinnear novel available for their reading enjoyment. However, one of the many benefits of being a member of the Alliance of Independent Authors is that you get discount codes for many of the products and services that are integral to an indie author's business, including Ingram Spark. With my Ally discount code, I can upload updated content for free, and that very quickly pays for the cost of a membership. I love Ally so much I'm an affiliate. If you join Ally through my affiliate link, you pay the normal price, but I get a percentage of the proceeds, which goes to support my time and effort producing this podcast. Just go to theindyauthor.com/resources for my affiliate link, and to find other resources that I find indispensable for my author business, affiliate and non-affiliate alike. Hello, and welcome to the Indy Author Podcast. Today, my guest is me. I just launched my 7th book and 4th Ann Kinnear Suspense Novel, A Furnace for Your Foe, on April 26th, 2021, and I thought it might be interesting for you to hear what my launch plan was. You got a bit of a preview of my launch approach back in October of 2020 in episode 49, Ruminations on Book Launches with James McCrone. Jamie was launching his 3rd Imogen Traeger thriller, Emergency Powers, and I was launching the 3rd Ann Kinnear suspense novel, The Falcon and the Owl, and we discussed in general how we approach book launches. It was an interesting conversation because we each prioritized somewhat different aspects, with Jamie being more focused on physical bookstores and me being more focused on online. I thought it might be useful for you to see how my launch for book 4 panned out. I initially thought about putting the spreadsheets that I use to track my launch activities out on the IndyAuthor.com as a resource, but I decided against that. When I was launching my earlier books, I downloaded templates from other authors and tried to follow their plans, but I found that I ended up investing time in tasks that may have worked great for them, but just weren't right for me, like press releases. And I probably missed approaches that would have been perfect for me, but that I overlooked because they weren't included in the source plan that I was using. So I'm not recommending that you try to copy my plan exactly as I executed it. Instead, I'm hoping you consider my plan and then adopt and personalize the parts that make sense for you. So let's launch into my recap of the launch of Ann Kinnear Book 4, A Furnace for Your Foe. First, pre-orders. One consideration for a launch is if you want to put it up for pre-order, and if you do, how far in advance you want to do it. You can hear lots more about the topic on episode 57, The Pros and Cons of Pre-orders with Joe Lallo. I decided to put up my pre-order a month in advance. One consideration was that I would never feel comfortable putting up a pre-order unless the book was almost completely finalized. A month out, I still did have some minor element placement changes that needed to be made to the cover, and I was still doing some final word tweaking. I also had the final proofread pending. But if something had gone wrong and readers got the initially uploaded version, it wouldn't have been disastrous. A month also had the benefit of giving me time to get those final tasks done without dragging the suspense out too long for fans and followers. I was able to upload the ebook to all the distribution platforms, KDP, Drafted Digital, Google Play, and Kobo, and set it to publish automatically on the launch date. The only book I had to wait until the launch date to upload was on PayHip, where I sell my ebooks direct. On Amazon KDP, print pre-orders are not available. The result is very awkward because you can order pre-launch print proofs from KDP, but they show up with a big "not for resale" banner across them. And for those who are watching the video, I'll show you what that looks like. Not something that you'd want to share with a reader. Handy, though, to check and make sure all the placement and content is what you want. On Amazon KDP, you also have to time when you hit publish on KDP for print so that the print book becomes available on Amazon as close to the ebook launch date and time as possible. In my case, I hit publish the day before, and that seemed to work out fine. For print on Ingram Spark, uploading the book in pre-order status means that it was available for pre-order on platforms like Barnes & Noble. You can order pre-launch print copies from Ingram that would be appropriate to sell, that don't have the "not for resale" banner across the cover. But as with anything Ingram related, it always seems to be harder than it needs to be. In the case of the launch of A Furnace for Your Foe, I thought I had placed an order for some print copies, but the day before the launch, when they still hadn't arrived, I checked the Ingram Spark website and found that I never actually hit submit on the order. And at that point, I just waited a day and ordered from Amazon. In my case, this wasn't a big issue because I had the clean proof copy from Ingram that I could hold up for the camera during my online launch event. More on that later. And since I wasn't selling print copies myself, more on that later as well, I really only needed the additional copies to give as thank you gifts to the people in the acknowledgments. However, this obviously would have been a huge issue if I had had an in-person launch party or book fair activities planned. For any bookstore that wanted to stock the books, they were available via Ingram as long as the bookstore knew which button to push. In terms of promotion, I'm focusing most of my promotional activities on social media. And I did a series of reveals on social media, mainly Facebook, to whet readers' appetites. First, I shared the epigraph. I always have an epigraph from a Shakespeare work from which the title is taken, and I invited readers to take a guess as to what the title is. The epigraph of book 4 is, "Heat not a furnace for your foe so hot that it do singe yourself," which is from Henry VIII. Then I did a reveal of part of the cover using one of those images where it looks like the paper is being removed from a print book. I created this image using BookBrush. The image showed just a little bit of the title, so this gave my fans and followers a little more information for them to guess the title. And then I did a full cover reveal, which obviously meant a title reveal as well, in this case, A Furnace for Your Foe. After the various reveals and until the launch date, I posted every day a brief excerpt, just a sentence or two from the book. I used Canva to create an image that showed the book cover on the right with an image of a ring of fire on the left, and then I just copied that each day and I put the day's excerpt inside the ring. I used Canva's Twitter template because Twitter post size images seem to work well on Facebook, whereas Facebook post size images don't seem to work well on Twitter. Using the same image every day not only made my life easier, but it also provided a nice branding consistency. Next, first in series promos. Promoting the first book in the Ann Kinnear series, The Sense of Death, was really the centerpiece of my promotion efforts, and I suspect that will be true no matter how many Ann Kinnear books I publish. I was thrilled to get a BookBub featured deal for The Sense of Death, which ran on April 18th, which was about a week before the launch of Book 4, and I was very pleased with the results. You can hear about them in the personal update segment of episode 75, Key Book Publishing Paths with Jane Friedman, and also on a blog post on the IndyAuthor.com, and I'll include a link in the show notes to that blog post. When I applied for the feature deal, I let BookBub know I was flexible on my days, but having the feature deal for The Sense of Death run about a week before the launch of A Furnace for Your Foe worked out pretty much perfectly because, except for the very fastest readers, Book 4 would be available by the time they had read through Books 1 and then hopefully Books 2 and 3 as well. I applied for several other email promo sites, and I was just not that impressed with the results. I'd love to find out how many readers you reach with those newsletters that aren't already subscribed to BookBub. I think that I would apply for those placements in other promo sites in the future if I didn't get a BookBub feature deal, but if I did, I might not bother. If promo sites is something you want to look into for your own launch, you can find lists of the best sites and which are best for various genres on Readsy and on the websites of Nicholas Eric, the Alliance of Independent Authors, and David Cochran, and I'll include links to those in the show notes as well. Next, deprioritizing bookstore sales. I have pretty much completely deprioritized bookstore sales in my business plan. The COVID restrictions made this path even more of a no-brainer for me, but I believe I would have pursued this even without that consideration. For one thing, consignment arrangements carry a huge administrative overhead for the store. I just recently got this note from one of the stores that used to carry my books on consignment. Due to the large number of requests we've received from local authors in the past few years, we've been overwhelmed with the administrative work this program requires. In addition, Ingram Publishing has become an easy way for customers to order these self-published books. In 2020, we've been forced to really examine the way we do our business and have changed our staffing, store hours, events, and inventory. As a result, with sadness, we've decided to discontinue our consignment program. As they point out, any bookstore can order your book as long as you have it on Ingram. No store is going to order from Amazon. So deprioritizing bookstore-related activities doesn't mean you're giving up on those sales. I do periodically remind my social media followers that this is an option for them. I also point them to bookshop.org, which not only makes my print books available on a platform that benefits indie bookstores, but also means that I get an affiliate commission if people buy books from my bookshop store. And you don't have to be an author to set up a store and bookshop and to earn affiliate commissions. However, for me, that's a tiny percentage of my sales, and I don't feel it's worth my time trying to pester busy bookstore buyers into stocking my books. And it's an even worse cost to earnings ratio to try to arrange in-person bookstore events. It's not that I wouldn't do these if I were invited, but I see them more as a community outreach than a sales-focused effort. However, for a countering viewpoint, please check out episode 20, Working with Libraries and Bookstores with Mark Leslie Lefebvre. However, for the second time, I used a launch approach to involve indie bookstores that has worked out well. I contacted bookstores with whom I had established a relationship and told them that if they were interested in stocking my book, which they could order through Ingram, I would mention them in my Facebook Live event, and I got 4 stores that expressed interest. Next, libraries. Although I have, at least for now, deemed the benefit of placement in bookstores not to be commensurate with the effort involved, I do actively pursue placement in libraries. All my ebooks are available to libraries via Overdrive and other library platforms, which I use Draft2Digital to reach. and they can order my print books via Ingram. In what is probably my longest running experiment on promotion approaches, every weekday I send an email to about 35 libraries, that's one screen's worth of rows in Excel, letting them know about my latest book. I would never prioritize this if I had to research library contacts myself, but I purchased a database of over 6,000 library contacts from Eric Simmons, and I'll include a link in the show notes. I've created a template in Gmail, and I send an individual email to each person, meaning that I just need to copy an email address and the name from the spreadsheet. I'm not using my email service MailChimp because I haven't gotten permission from the library contacts to email them, and so I would be violating the MailChimp terms of service. The content of the email is basically a personalized greeting and an announcement of the latest book, a link to a page on my website that provides them with all the information they need, such as ISBNs, one image showing all the books in the series I'm promoting with the latest book larger than the others, a note that William Kingsfield Publishers believes in making its books available to libraries, and if you run into any problems accessing my books via your acquisition system, please let me know so that I can follow up with the appropriate distributor, and a list of books in the series I'm promoting with reviewer quotes. I understand that libraries value quotes from established review platforms over author blurbs and reader reviews, so where I have a Kirkus quote, I use that. Since at the moment I don't have any reviews for A Furnace for Your Foe, I'm using the book description for that one. One of the reasons I feel this is worth my time is that I'm charging $29.99 for my ebook novels. This is more than most indies charge, but way less than most trad publishers charge, and I think there's no reason that indies can't move their prices to be more in line with those prices, assuming you have a high quality product. I've made about $325 from sales from Overdrive this year, Overdrive being one of the primary library systems. If I divide 325 by the time I've spent sending the emails, it's probably not a very profitable time investment yet, but I figure that there are still a lot of librarians who may not heed my first or second email, but who will take notice when they receive a third or fourth email, and that my profit from the library sales will continue to build over time. It's possible to earn royalties not only from libraries purchasing a copy of your ebook or print book, but there are also per checkout models. I've signed up for those where possible, but I have to admit that this is something I need to investigate further in order to fully understand what benefit I'm getting from those. Next up, launch day. Pre-COVID, I used to hold launch parties at Kildare's Irish Pub in Westchester, Pennsylvania. But in view of social distancing considerations, I moved the October 2020 launch of Book 3, The Falcon and the Owl, to Facebook Live, and I don't know if I'll be going back. The in-person party was fun, definitely more of a socializing event than a sales event, although I did make a fair number of sales, but the logistics were difficult, and just getting the books to the venue was a huge pain. The online event was much easier logistically. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, I didn't have any books to wrangle. And it's not only easier for me, it's easier for fans too. It's a lot easier, although admittedly not quite as exciting, for a fan or a follower to set aside half an hour to join an event from the comfort of their own home than to set aside the time needed to get to and from an in-person event. And I can involve people who live far away and would never be able to attend an in-person event. However, as easy as an online event is, be sure to budget plenty of time for it. I spent a lot of time planning and scripting out the event. You should also be sure to set aside enough time and energy on the day of the event. I had accidentally booked a podcast interview recording on my launch day, and I was so glad when the guest discovered he was double booked and asked to move the interview. I also had to contend with the fact that I usually allocate a good chunk of my Mondays to finalizing the podcast episodes, which go out early on Tuesdays, so a Monday launch wasn't ideal. However, I was using one of my monthly full moon giveaway Facebook Live events as my launch celebration, and the full moon wasn't going to conveniently move to another day. I actually recorded a version of this episode the day after the launch when I was still scrambling to take care of the post-event tasks, and when I listened to it, I realized that it was so lacking in energy that I really needed to re-record it. So back to the event itself, here are some tips. I fully scripted out the event, not only because I didn't want to ramble, but also because I wanted to make sure it came in under 30 minutes. I have a goal to work toward doing these types of events with just notes, not a full script, but it will be an evolution. One trick I used that at least makes it a little less obvious that I was reading was that I made the right and left margins of my document very wide, 2.5 inches wide, so that my eyes just had to move back and forth across a narrow strip of text as I scrolled using my mouse wheel. I also highlighted key phrases to ideally enable me to just glance at the phrase and know what I needed to say in that section. I enlist my husband as the co-host of these events so that he can pop appropriate information and links into the comments during the event. We also have a shared Google Doc open so that he can type messages or convey questions to me without me having to click around in the Facebook Live window, which I find quite complicated. I use the standard intro that I've developed for my monthly full moon giveaway events, which identifies me and my work, mentions the giveaway, and that the winners will be announced at the end. I mention where attendees can get the book. The purchase options that I emphasized during the Facebook Live event were the 4 indie stores who had agreed to carry the book. Buying the ebook direct via PayHip, this was a good option because most of the people who were attending the event were already fans and followers, and I think they're the ones who are most likely to be willing to buy direct. Check out episode 76, Book Funnel with Damon Courtney, for more on that. Ebook, regular print, and large print on all the usual retail platforms. Books to read links that would take the readers to all the major online retailers. Affiliate links for the 2 print editions on Amazon, and bookshop.org for print, where I would get, as I mentioned, not only the credit for the sales, but also some affiliate income. I also mentioned the various platforms where readers can contact or interact with me, gave some background on the settings of my books, discussed the setting of A Furnace for Your Foe, discussed the development of the cover and the evolution of the series covers over time. I shared the book's description. I set an expectation about the length of the event and the fact that in service of keeping it to half an hour, I wouldn't be addressing all the questions during the event, just the ones that my husband typed into the shared Google Doc, but that I would reply to all of them after the event wrapped up. I read 2 excerpts, and a tip there is I had color-coded the dialogue so I could tell instantly which character was speaking, even if the dialogue tag wasn't until the end of the sentence. Because there's nothing weirder than listening to someone read a piece of dialogue in one voice and then get to the end and realize that it was actually a different character saying that. At the end of the event, I shared a shorter version of the information I shared at the beginning of the event, and I also let attendees know that I'm open to participating in virtual book clubs. That offer hasn't been taken up yet, but I'm still hopeful. Then I announced the giveaway winners, and I reminded them of the date of the next full moon event. So having that regular, repeatable agenda is helpful because I don't have to recreate it for each event. Another benefit of an online event, at least it's a good thing unless things really go off the rails, is that you have a piece of content that people who didn't attend a live event can still enjoy. And if you're streaming on a platform that will allow you to excerpt portions, you can use those portions as promotional material long after the event is wrapped up. If you want to check out the Facebook Live launch for A Furnace for Your Foe, I will include a link in the show notes. A couple of other general tips about book launches. I always set up a Google alert for the book's title because it's always fun to find out if somebody's talking about it. And also update your bio as appropriate. And I keep a list of all the places my bio appears so that I don't miss any. I can just spend a little time, a day or two before the launch, banging the new book into all my bios. So what are some things I didn't do? One thing I didn't do is press releases. These are a huge time suck, and although I've done them for the past few launches, I don't know that I ever got any results that made the time worthwhile. In fact, I've pretty much discarded the whole media kit idea, of which press releases are usually a part. I do have an online press kit page on mattydalrymple.com and the indyauthor.com that just includes my bio, author photos, social media links, and also topics on which I can give talks or presentations. Another thing I didn't do is submit to reviewers. Jamie McCrone and I had a really good discussion about this in episode 49, Ruminations on Book Launches. Jamie spent quite a bit of time researching reviewers and soliciting reviews, and he got some really great ones. But I reluctantly decided not to invest the time. My primary reason is that I have great reviews for the early books in the series, and I mainly focused on driving readers to book 1 in the hope that they will read through the whole series. So I'm not convinced that a great review for book 4 will be as valuable to me. And those reviews, like Hercus, not only take time, but also cost money to get, so another consideration. However, this approach is something that I'm going to rethink for every launch. Another thing I didn't do was to solicit guest post opportunities. Here again, I judged that the time I would spend tracking down these opportunities, not to mention writing the posts, could be better spent elsewhere, although I did get a few guest post invitations along the way. If guest posting is something you want to pursue, then be sure to check out episode 27, Why to Stop Blogging and What to Do Instead with Pauline Wiles. Another thing I did not do was a book trailer. I've actually gotten pretty proficient at creating book trailers using, believe it or not, PowerPoint. And I really enjoy doing them, but I just couldn't justify the time investment. And finally, distribution of promo codes. I am still struggling with the logistics of how to do this. If I had a process in place, I would totally have spent the time on using promo codes to try to get readers to some of my more underutilized platforms like Apple and Google Play. So what did I do instead? I continued my focus on Facebook ads for the first book in the series and continued building up my social media presence and followers, especially through my relatively new private Facebook group, Matty Dalrymple Readers Group. To hear the conversation that inspired me to set the group up, check out episode 66, From Indie to Traditional with Jason Casper. I'm not entirely comfortable with this approach because I'm putting a lot of my promotional and reader outreach eggs in the Facebook basket, so I'm continually reassessing other platforms I can use to provide a better safety net. For book marketing in general, I'd like to follow the example of technology companies that set aside a certain amount of time for their employees to work on projects that are completely unassociated with their assigned work. For each book launch, I'd like to try out an approach that I haven't used before, or that I used before but didn't work out for me then, but give it a different spin. For example, I don't see myself ever doing a traditional press release, but I'm sure that someone is going to come up with a less onerous manual process to let interested media platforms know about a new book, and I'd certainly be willing to give it a try. If you know of such a platform, please let me know. I'd love to hear your ideas for book launch activities. What does and doesn't sound interesting for your own book launch among the ideas I've shared, and what has and hasn't worked for you? Please cruise on over to the indieauthor.com/podcast and click on episode 77 to let me know.